First, I'd like to welcome everybody here to the Archives and History Library. And second, I want to apologize for the delay. We've had some technical glitches here that we just can't seem to overcome. Before I bring Anthony up, though, to introduce this evening's speaker, I'd like to mention some of our upcoming events. On August 16th, Charlie Cooper will show excerpts of the 1932 film Charleston, Beautiful on the Kanawha River, and discuss the work that went into producing the film. Dr. Billy Joe Payton will also be here that evening to discuss some of the historical aspects of that film. On August 30th, the block series continues with Dr. R. Charles Byers. For upcoming events, please check our website, wvculture.org/history, or our Facebook page, which is West Virginia Archives and History. And now I'd like to ask Anthony to come up and introduce our evening's block speaker.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm happy to see you all this evening. I want to start the evening by giving my regards to Mrs. Anna Gilmer, who was our guest speaker back in May. With regards to her family, deeply sorry that she has lost her son, Paul, that we all know and will cherish over 50 years in Little League football and track and field. He's a fantastic guy, and really I'm sorry that he's gone. Ms. Gilmer, we pray for her, that things will be good for her as time goes on. As Charles has said, our organization, the West Virginia Center for African American Art and Culture, wants to continue with this block speaker series. As he has mentioned, our next speaker next month will be Dr. R. Charles Byers. I'm sure that everyone will know who he is and can appreciate his teaching and his business skills. And with regards to business skills, I'd like to make it known that our current speaker, Sim Fryson, is an awesome and fantastic businessman. His credentials are impeccable. His life, being raised here in Charleston area, and his education, his family, I'm sure all of you know who he is, his family. I want to again thank you for coming. I also want to mention that as we progress through the next months of September and October, our organization, the West Virginia Center for African American Art and Culture, are partnering with the West Virginia Public Broadcasting and StoryCorps. If you're not aware, StoryCorps has an audio directory as it comes on the radio each Friday morning. They do vocal, historic audios of individuals in the community. We are partnering with them as well as other community organizations to record historic stories of individuals that we believe will be a very valuable asset to our community, or has been a valuable asset to our community. But I don't want to take up your time much any further, but I do want to introduce Mr. Sim Fryson. As I said, he's a fantastic businessman, and his accomplishments, as you see by the pictures, and you'll hear and or see by video, you'll be very, very impressed by what he has done and what we believe that he can continue doing. I want to, again, thank you for coming and introduce Mr. Sim Fryson. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Anthony. I really appreciate that. I'm humbled by what you had to say about me, and I want you all, each and every one of you, to know that none of these things that you see here would have been accomplished about the blessings of the Lord to get me to be able to do it. And I'm truly humbled by it. And I just want to thank everybody for just allowing me to be in your presence, to kind of relive a little bit of my past and talk about what I'm doing now, talk about how that I got to this point and some of the things that some people think are accomplishments. I'm just humbled enough to know that I was blessed with some great parents. And that's the thing that I really like about that, is be in the household that I grew up in. No household is perfect, but I am thankful for that. If you don't mind, I would like to pray. Gracious Father, I thank you, Lord, for this opportunity to speak. And I would ask, oh Lord, that my words would be your words, and that you bless this group together. Indeed, we're blessed already because we still have the breath of life in us. So thank you, dear Lord, and guide us through this in Jesus' name. Amen. First thing that I want to do is I want to introduce my wife. Would you stand up, Susan? I need my wife to stand up now. When you look at her and you look at me, now I know some people think she might have been my daughter. Now, I get that sometimes, so I want to let you know up front that I was gracious enough to have enough charm at my age when I married her to be able to woo her into my corner. So somebody ought to say amen to that, huh? Isn't she beautiful? Not only that, she's very intelligent. I also have a son, Brent. Brent has been with UPS for the better part of 20 years. And I tried to get him involved in my business, and he just didn't like dealing with the people. And I said, son, I can understand that. So he's been there a career for 20 years, and he does well. We have a daughter by the name of Sydney, and she's an up-and-coming star. And I say that because she went to George Washington High School, graduated with a 4.02 grade point average, went to Hampton University, graduated cum laude there, and then she got her master's degree at the age of 22 years old from Columbia University. So that's quite an accomplishment for her. And I give my wife credit for that. Not all the credit. You got to have a little bit of humor, you know. But and my daughter, Sydney, is also an anomaly because she happens to be the first lady of ethnicity to be in NASCAR, and she's the manager of social media and digital marketing for Rouse Fenway Racing. And you know that's an anomaly. So she gets a chance to travel across the country and to these events, and she does a lot of the social media. She's in charge of not in charge of the drivers, but she makes sure the drivers are taken care of. So she goes through all of that venue, so we're quite proud of her. And then my youngest daughter, she graduated from GW. She happened to be the first black head cheerleader in the school's history, and we think that's an accomplishment. She graduated with a 3.73 from GW, and now she is at North Carolina A&T. She'll be a junior this year, and so she's in public relations. And both of my daughters are in North Carolina. My youngest daughter, Sierra, is doing an internship with, what's the name of the school? Rev Racing. And so they ended up being about 11 minutes apart, so that's a blessing. And I had to talk to my oldest daughter about not trying to tutor my youngest daughter too much. You know how that goes, that sibling rivalry. But we're just grateful that they're down there together and they're able basically to take care of each other. I had made up in my mind how I was going to start my presentation. Can you hear me out there? I had made up in my mind how I was going to do my presentation, and I thought maybe I would have a mixed multitude of people here, and I was going to talk a little bit about the youth on how to accomplish certain things. But I think I have to kind of redirect it a little bit, not for any obvious reason, but I think I have to redirect it a little bit to let you know that I still have everybody in mind on this venue. My story started, actually the story of our family started when my dad, that was born in Reform, Alabama. And if you know anything about Alabama in the early 1900s, with a man that of his ethnicity, you know that he probably ran into some issues. But my dad was very articulate for his age. He didn't get but to about the 3rd grade, and he was so intelligent that he basically taught himself how to read and write. And down there in an area like that, that wasn't really common for a person to be able to master the King's English the way he was able to do it. And so what that did, it causes some problems with him when he was articulating to the communities. And there were some people that really didn't like it. And my dad he wasn't a man of violence. He was very articulate, very intelligent, and he was very diplomatic. He knew how to handle situations with people from all walks of life. And there were some people that took exception to that. Well, it ended up that my dad had to end up, and I won't go into the other story, but he had to end up fleeing from Alabama. He basically fled from Alabama and came to Charleston, West Virginia with 20 cents in his pocket. And his first wife's name was Gertrude. And they were here about a year, and his wife had a brain aneurysm, and she died. And so what happened after that, my dad worked different jobs, and he used to go to work, and on the way to work at a place called Chris and Shaver, that was a concrete place, he ran into this little girl that happened to be about 9 years old, and they struck up a conversation. And while they were talking over the weeks, that period of time, the little girl said, "You know, Mr. Fryson, you ought to meet my mother." And he said, "Well, I might be able to meet your mother." She said, "Well, is she married?" He said, "No, my mother's not married." He said, "Okay, I'll meet your mother." So it ended up that my daughter, Dorothy, introduced my dad to her mother, and they ended up falling in love. My mother had 5 children at the time. So you know my dad had to love that woman. You got to have some humor. He had to love that woman. He had 5 children. So they ended up marrying, and then there were 3 of us. It was myself, I'm the eldest, and I have a brother, David. I'm sure you all know him, and I have another brother, Paul. And so that's basically how the family got together. My dad, as I said, when he had those 8 children to take care of, you know, the money he got from the job he had was not enough to cover everything. So he became an entrepreneur, and he bought an old raggedy pickup truck, worse than Sanford & Son. I'm telling you, literally worse than Sanford & Son, and my dad was proud of what he did. So he decided to be the entrepreneur that he was, and he got a sign, and on the sign he wrote on the top of the cab with the sign, it says, "Here comes Sim." And on the back of that sign, it said, "There goes Sim." Well, I got to tell you, I got teased about that when I was in high school. And there were times Dad would come and pick us up, and I was kind of hiding a little bit. And as I look back on it, I'd never do that because I was proud of my dad and what he stood for. And little did I know the enterprising spirit that he had would actually be inculcated into his sons. And that's truly a blessing. So that's basically how we got started there. I went to grade school, and then I went to junior high school, and I always had a fascination for automobiles. When I was 4 or 5 years old, I could name all the makes and models. At that particular point in time, my dad got another job while he was doing his enterprising job as a night watchman, basically. He cleaned the buses at Charleston Transit. And so he took that job at night to be able to have his days cleared, to be able to cut down trees, cut grass, and all of those type of things. And as I said, my dad was very enterprising. Well, you know, when you have a young teenager, we have other things on our mind other than, you know, cutting grass and things like that. But Daddy hauled us everywhere that he could, you know, and he took us with him. And we basically got our enterprising skills from doing those type of things, because I was able to do the things that, you know, a lot of people at my age were not able to do. And there were some things he wanted to teach me, like the trees. He could name all of the trees. He was a horticulturist as well. He could name the shrubbery. And I said, "Daddy, I don't need to know those names." But lo and behold, as I got older, I said, I wish my daddy was around so he could tell me all those names so I could be able to, you know, relay that to my children. But you know how it is at that particular point in time. When you're young, you don't really think about things like that. But later on, you reflect on it, and it really makes your life full. But I was blessed to have a mother and dad like that. My mother, as I said, did a lot of enterprising things. My mother was won a beauty. My mother was beautiful, and she won a beauty contest here. She became Miss Silverleaf. And so she got some monetary change for that. And back during those years, you know, that really helped the family. Also, she ended up driving a cab. I don't know if you remember the Red Star Cab Company. My mother was enterprising, and she was the first lady driver in the city to drive a taxi cab. So that shows you how they work together to get things the way they are. Okay, that's great. he just let me know that that video was coming up, which we appreciate that. Okay. Well, let me start in my career, if you'd like to hear that part. You let me know when you want me to, when we can do the video. We can probably wait till last there. Anyway, people ask me, how did you get started in the car business? I really got started in the car business at a young age because, as I said, my dad worked at Charleston Transit, and what he'd do, he would take us on bus rides. And when I was on the bus ride, I'd see the different cars, and I just started naming them. And he couldn't believe it at 5 years old that I could name those cars. So it actually was in my blood. And so I always had a fascination for cars. And so I put that on the back burner. And what happened basically after that, after I got out of high school, I decided that there was something that I needed to do. Now, when you're in the Fryson family, when you graduate from high school, you have 3 options. You can go to work, you can go to military, you can go to school. There wasn't no 4th option about laying around at home. You can forget that. You're going to do that. So what I chose to do was go to the military. And I happened to graduate from this, Dr. Byers here. We graduated high school together. I know I look much younger than he does, but we were in the same class. But we graduated together, and my option was to go to the United States Air Force. And that's what I ended up doing. And was in the Air Force for 4 years. Prior to that, I was 2 years in the military reserve, the United States Navy Reserve in high school for 2 years. And I like the structure of the military. I like the organization. I like, you know, the regiment, the way things are. And my wife probably tells me I'm too regiment. She has to often tell me that you're not in the military. I'm your wife. You know, I'm not a sergeant under you. But anyway, I really like the order of that sort of thing. At the age of 17, I went in. And at 17 years old, I was in Southeast Asia. I was in a place called Nakhon Phanom, Thailand. And that's 10 miles from the Laotian border. And what they used to do, they used to run strafing bombers out of there. It was a B-26, but they recalculated to an A-26. And they did the bombing missions out there. And they also had that A-1E Sky Raider. You know, if you remember the Vietnam War at all, they had the A-1E Sky Raider, and they do strafing mission with those. They had a 105 jet, but it was too far advanced for the type of warfare they were doing. By the time that they did a strafe, they had to go miles out of the way and then turn back and come around. But that A-1E Sky Raider, it could turn on a dime, and they flew a lot of those missions out of there. And I remember one came back in from a combat mission, and I was a kind of administrative guy. One came in from a combat mission, and so he was on fire. And he landed there, and I saw him, and I said, I'm going to be a hero. So I went running out through there to try to be the guy to get the pilot out of the airplane. And by that time, the fire engine came running by me like I was standing still, and they got him out. So that was my first attempt at being a hero. But you can imagine the exhilaration that I felt when I was over there like that. But I ended up liking the military. In fact, I liked it so well, I told them that if they would make me a recruiter, and basically stationed me in Charleston, West Virginia, I'd stay in. That's how much I loved it. But I also like West Virginia because I'm indigenous to this area, born and raised. And when I go places and talk to people, they think, and I have to say that we're a bunch of hillbillies and coal miners. They don't realize what an anomaly that West Virginia is, you know. And when I talk to them about some of the accomplishments that people have done here, then they're really amazed. And we are the best kept secret in the country. Believe it or not, with our economic struggles that we're having right now, we're a good kept secret. So I hate to see our state lose population the way it is. I think we were 1,800,000, and in the last 10 years, I believe we lost 18,000 people. That's a lot. But anyway, I always liked here in West Virginia, and I wanted to come back if they'd make me a recruiter. They didn't do that, so I came back because I loved my dad. He was getting older, and I wanted to spend some time with him. When I got back here, I didn't tell you all about my music career. I don't have anything here about music, but Rabbit talked to me about it. Rabbit there was a drummer. Played with a lot of people that I played with, and it took me a minute to recognize him because I hadn't seen him in a long time. But Rabbit was a fantastic drummer, and we played on some of the same circuits. So when I got out of the Air Force, I started playing music again with a group called the King Sound Interpreters. And everybody knows King Curtis Price. Everybody knows him. In fact, Kurt died a few years ago, and I happened to be honored by his wife to do a part of his eulogy. And you're talking about a humbling experience. It really was a humbling experience for me because he and I were tight. He was a couple years younger than I was when we played at a club called the Mantiki. Now that club days, that's behind me. I'm with the Lord now, so I don't want you all to think that I'm still doing that. Nothing wrong with it at the time. But Kurt and I were together, and when he came into the band, we just kind of hit it off, and we were distant cousins in marriage. So I got a chance to speak somewhat at his eulogy, and I feel good about that. And one excerpt that I have to bring up to you is that they called him King Curtis. And so what happened, I would talk about some of the things we did as 13-year-olds playing in nightclubs with people that are 50 years old. I talked a little bit about that, but one thing that I didn't get a chance to say was that he did all those accomplishments, and I said I was with Kurt when we were still pauper boys. That was before he became king. So I really relished that fact of what kind of relationship that we had there. Anyway, I decided that I needed to work as well other than playing music. So I got a job with the state of West Virginia. Can you believe that? I got a job with the state of West Virginia, and I ended up training to be a highway inspector. And what I would do, I'd go out on the job and I'd inspect highways and that sort of thing. It was a pretty good job. Didn't pay very much, but it was a pretty good job, and I had some flexible hours. And so sure enough, after about 5 months, the spoil system hit. They changed administrations, and I got laid off. So I still played music. I was playing baseball during that period of time. I haven't brought that up yet. I could talk all day about it because I enjoyed what I did in life. I hope you think that I'm being humble with this. As I reflect on things, I'm saying, nah, did I do that or did I do this? Anyway, I ended up getting a job at Union Carbide. And back during that time, Union Carbide was a formidable place to work, you know. It kept the economy here going, as you very well know, and there's a lot of people in this room that probably work there. Anyway, I got hired in the labor gang. And so all that period of time, I was playing music. I was basically working. And I won't tell the other things that I did because my wife is here. Anyway, I had a good time doing those type of things. So I was at Carbide for about 1 year. And after a year, they came to me and wanted to know if I wanted to go into the pipe fitters. And I said, pipe fitters? I said, well, if it's more money, I'll do it. Just train me. Let's go. So I ended up doing that. And as I was doing that, some of the guys that were in the pipe game with me were a little older than I was. And they always told me, he said, man, you need to get out of here. You need to get out of here. I said, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. So I thought in my mind that if I ever got laid off from Union Carbide, I would go to school. Go to school because I wanted to go to school and play baseball and actually football. And so sure enough, a few months later, I got my check and they had a pink slip in it and I got laid off. And so right there I said, that's going to chart my course. I'm going to go to college. I had a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, that Sandra Carter. Sandra Carter was a counselor at George Washington High School. We grew up together. I loved her like a sister. We were really close. We could talk about things that ordinary people couldn't talk about. She was like a sister to me. And so I called her. I said, Sandra, you need to help me get into college. And she ended up coming to the house. We sat down and went over some things and went down to the college, and she helped me get into the college. And so I wanted to play football. And so I went down to join the football team, and I talked to Coach Colin Cameron. He was the head coach at that particular point in time. And he tried me out. He said, okay, son. He said, look, you get accepted, come back, and I'll give you a shot. Well, back during those days, you couldn't hand carry the transcript. You had to mail it. And so my transcript got lost in the mail. So they finally found it 2 weeks later. And I went back to the coach. He said, son, I've got 62 guys and I only need 60. So I was a little down. I said, Coach, I really wanted to do that. He said, son, I know I got too many. So I had the molly grubs. I was a little bit down. I'm always positive, but I was a little bit down. I said, what am I going to do now? So I walked up to the student union And there was a gentleman in there by the name of Doug Tench. He was my counselor. And he said, "What's the matter, man?" I said, "Man, I just left the football field and Coach Cameron won't let me play." He said, "Well, you play baseball anyway." He said, "The baseball team is having their fall practice." He said, "Why don't you go down and try out for them?" So I went down and I walked on to the baseball team, and I ended up playing for West Virginia State University for 3 years. In my junior year, I got selected honorable mention all conference as a catcher, designated hitter, and right fielder. So that just shows you how life can be. And my mother didn't want us to play football anyway. All of us were pretty good at it. My brother Paul, he was a quarterback. I was a wide receiver. And my brother David, he wasn't too athletic and kind. And I wish he was here so I could make that comment. But he did a great job from an intellectual standpoint, as everybody knows his name. But anyway, there are a lot of injuries. And now that I'm the age that I am, I see some of these guys kind of hobbling around. And I'm kind of glad that maybe I didn't play football. Anyway, I ended up in my junior year, I was looking for a car. And I always wanted a Corvette. So there was a lot in Nitro, West Virginia, called Keith Bateman Used Cars, and he specialized in those type of cars, Corvettes, Porsches, that sort of thing. And I went down, and there was a British racing green Corvette with saddle interior in it, and I made the deal with it, and I had fun doing it. And Keith said, "Sim," he said, "Look, man," he said, "what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm going to school, playing music, playing baseball." He said, "Look, you ought to get involved in this business. You can go a long way." I said, "Keith, I don't have time, man. I'm carrying all these hours. I got one more year, and I want to be the first one in my family to graduate from college." And so he said, "Well, think about it. So I thought about it, and about a week later, I called him. I said, "Man, maybe I could squeeze it in the evenings or weekends like that." He said, "Well, let's see what we can do." So I went down, and he trained me, and I liked it so much that I decided to quit playing baseball. Didn't give up my music, didn't give up school. At that time, too, I had a part-time job at IBM, so my calendar was full. I gave up the job at IBM, and I went to dedicate myself to the car business while I was still going to school. And then I had one more year left, and I went to him, and I said, "Keith, I've got to quit. I've got to take 22 hours to get my undergraduate degree." And I did that. And he called me again when I was graduating. He said, "What are you doing now?" I said, I graduate on May the 8th. He said, "Well, look, I got a job for you." And he had sold his business in Nitro, and he was a new car sales manager at C&O Motors in St. Albans. And they sold 500-600 cars a month during that period of time. I said, "Well, Keith, I can't come now, man. I've got 2 months and I'm graduating." He said, "I've got it worked out for you to come, and you can do it part-time in the evenings and on weekends." And I said, "Okay." So May the 8th, I graduated, went from the auditorium floor down to the new car sales department, and I started selling cars full-time. So that truly was a blessing. And I happened to be the first black American in the state to be able to sell cars, only to let you know that how progressive that they were and how it opened up an opportunity for me. One thing that I forgot is that when I was going to college, I had a dear friend, Dr. Byers, who we graduated together. When I got out of high school, he went to school, I went into the military. So when I got in school, Dr. Bowers was a teacher down there. So I went and talked to him, and one of the first classes I had was with him. And so he had a lot of encouragement with me, and to show him how good I was, and I'm not patting myself on the back, I aced his class. But he was an inspiration, so I really appreciate that. After I got to be the new car salesman there at C&O Motors, I'd been there for 8 months. And there was a job that opened up as a business manager. They handle all of the finances. They're the liaison between the salespeople, the bank, and the company. And there was an opening, and I didn't apply for it. And so the general manager, Gene Walker, called me at home one night. He said, "Stuff," that was the nickname he had for me. He said, why didn't you apply for that job?" I said, "Keith, I've only been here, or Gene, I've only been here 8 months. You have guys been here for 8 or 9 years. He said, "Well, look, we want to interview you for that job." I said, "Man, I'm flattered about that." I was happy. I was making good money and, doing a lot of things, still playing music. So I interviewed for the job, and he said, I want you to have the job, and we're prepared to pay you X amount of dollars. And I thought to myself, my entrepreneurial self, I said, well, if they want me, you know what I mean, and they want to pay me X amount of dollars, they came to me, I said, well, look, I'll do that job, but I won't take that, but I'll tell you what I will take. Didn't have anything to lose, right? And so he looked at me up and down, he said, okay, Stuff, you got it. And so that catapulted my career into the automobile business as the first black finance and insurance business manager in the state. And I'd like to tell you that since I am an anomaly, my parents always prepared me to be able to handle obstacles if they ever got in the way from you trying to achieve your goals. And, you know, growing up, we didn't have thin skin. They always told us don't wear your heart on your shirt sleeve because somebody will kick it off. So I was able to maneuver my way through those sometimes difficult situations with a lot of humbleness and understanding that I was a pioneer and I didn't want to disrupt any problem, anything that somebody might be coming behind me. But for the most part, I didn't have a problem. One time after I first got the business manager's job, I went into my office to sit down at my desk, and somebody had wrote a big slur there. And I just looked at it because I knew who it was. And he never knew that I knew that he did it. And we ended up being friends. Matter of fact, he just died about 6 months ago. So I'm telling you that to say that I'm very humbled to be able to be in the position that I am. I'm more humbled that I'm able to sit and talk to a group of fine citizens like I'm doing today. And I could talk a lot more, but I don't want to take up all of your time because I want to leave some of it for questions. Are there any questions at this point in time?
Well, don't be shy. Ask
Yes.
questions.
I learned one thing tonight that I'm really glad about, and that I love to walk around in Spring Hill Cemetery,
Yes, sir.
and I've seen your father's gravesite there, and for years I've wondered what there goes Slim,
Yes, sir.
or Sim, you know, what the story was behind that.
Yes, sir.
So now I know.
That is the story behind it. As I said, we had a raggedy pickup truck, and he had that "Here Comes Sim" on the front, and on the back of the sign said, "There goes Sim." And I decided it was a fitting tribute to put it on his tombstone some years later. So that's really the story. But, you know, we were very proud of our dad, very proud of it. He worked hard, and he taught us that work ethic. He said, listen, in life, you know, in order to make ends meet, you're going to have to work. And he said, the best thing to do is you ought to learn to love it, you know. And I talk a lot to youth, and I try to get them to understand the importance of a good work ethic. And I tell them that probably 70% of the people that have jobs are unhappy with the job that they're in. Because what happens, they get in a situation where they get out of high school maybe, and they have not planned to go to college or have any type of career that just comes what may. And they end up getting in careers that they don't necessarily like. Then they end up maybe getting married and have a child, and it's kind of not stifles their growth, but it keeps them from maybe focusing to get a higher education. So I tell them, I said, make sure that you understand the importance of getting in a career that you like. I said, why don't you spend 5, 7, maybe 8 years preparing yourself to be in the workforce where you're going to be there for 50 years, you know, rather than the reverse. So I get a chance to talk to people about that and try to enlighten them on the importance of being and having a career that they really like. Some groups that I talk to, I'll ask the question, I say, how many people in here that want to be professional football players? A lot of the hands are raised up. Then I ask, how many people want to be professional baseball players? There's more hands that raise up. Then I say, how many people in here that want to be doctors? Sporadic amount. How many want to be lawyers? A sporadic amount. And I tell them, I said, listen, those sporting jobs are important. I said, the last recollection I had is that there's only 1,500 of those jobs, you know, nationwide. And I said, LeBron James is not going anywhere, so that's 1,499 left. So I said, nothing wrong for those aspirations, but what happens if you don't make it? And I try to get them to think about those fields that can be very lucrative and probably more sure in terms of career other than sports. Nothing wrong with sports. I like sports myself. And I happen to play baseball with that gentleman right there, Tom Lawson. We were the up the middle guys. He was a shortstop and I played second base. So it was the dynamic duo, and I'll put him first. Something like that. Anyway, I tell the kids about it. And one thing that I tell them, I have a phrase that I bring up. I try to tell them the importance of focusing on a career and being productive. You know, the Lord has blessed you with all your faculties. Use that brain that he gave you you can do some fantastic things. And I tell them, it's what you do when you don't have to that's going to determine where you're going to be when you can no longer help it. It's what you do when you don't have to that's going to determine the outcome. Now, I know you all looked at me, well, what is he saying? It's what you do when you don't have to that's going to determine where you're going to be when you can no longer help it. And I asked the question, I said, how many people in here smoke? You don't have to put your hand up. Some people will raise your hand and say, well, I do smoke. And I tell them, I said, you remember when you didn't have to? I said, when you first lit up, your body was rejecting it, you were choking and that sort of thing. And then the next day you got a little bit better. The day after that you got better. And then you start smoking and then you start blowing smoke rings. I said, hopefully that you won't contract any problem as a result from smoking later on in years. Because it's what you do when you don't have to that's going to determine where you're going to be when you can no longer help it. It's what you do when you don't have to that's going to determine the outcome. Okay? My wife was a stickler on my kids doing certain things. You know, they had to get their lessons. It wasn't anything about coming home and going to play. First thing you did, you got your homework. Then you had your dinner, and if you had any other time, you'd read the books. And my kids and my wife, they love books. I used to take them on trips, and most of the kids wanted to go to an amusement park. My kids wanted to go to the library, you know. And I'd allow them, 5 books I said you could get at one time. And so here they'd go, they said, well, Daddy, Mommy, I know you said 5, but these 2 we need as well. I said, no, 5. In hindsight, I probably shouldn't have restricted them, but they were readers. And as a result of that, that's where they are today. You know, the mind is an amazing thing. And we don't often realize that. And I think that in our community, at one time we had the ties with West Virginia State College, and it was called the Living Laboratory of Human Relations. That meant something because I learned so much here in this town from that college and being in this environment that when I took it out into the world, people are amazed that, and I hope you understand I can talk the King's language. They were amazed at the way that I was able to articulate, you know, and communicate. And I saw people from Philadelphia, Alabama, all over the world that really didn't have the skills that I learned here and didn't really realize that we had that skills. And so I've always been proud of being from West Virginia. In fact, I really never wanted to leave, and that's another story. I wanted to try to make my mark here because my dad liked it here, my mother liked it here, and I like it here. And so that's one reason why I had to come back. I have a lot more that I can talk about, but I think I will stop at this point in time. I don't want to bore you any longer. Any questions? You had one question. Yes, sir, Mr. Barris.
You mentioned cars, but I remember you most about trains.
Oh, okay.
You never mentioned trains. Do you still have that?
Well, I still have some trains. In fact, my wife got on me this evening about my trains. She said that, look, I got, you know, you have your trains all down and neatly stacked and that sort of thing. Here, I got my luggage. You moved it out of the way. So she talked about those trains. I still have them, but it's amazing when you're growing up like that and you can't get them, you know, you really relish them. And now that I have them, they're back there and I don't even play with them that much. You all are awful quiet. I'm used to more interaction, you know, from that. Especially, I do a lot of teaching. I teach a lot of Bible studies. And a lot of times I get a lot of reaction because people have questions about the Bible, and we go through it and we relate to the Bible and talk about some things that people might not know about. So I'm used to the interaction. So you have to have some humor now. You have to have a little bit of humor. Yes, sir.
So have you had the privilege of being an adjunct professor at West Virginia State University?
No, sir, I have not. I would think that maybe you'd put a plug in for me. There's Dr. Byers there. I thought maybe that might happen. So maybe you can take that and run with it. You know. Oh, you're tired? Okay. All right. There is so much more that I could relate to you about. I really, if you look at the Dunbar sign there, the Dunbar one, growing up as a little boy, I said, you know what? One of these days, I want to have a business and I want to be able to have my dad's name on it. So the Lord allowed me to grow up and be able to do that as well. If you see those jerseys there, that was the Dunbar Midget League that I was able to sponsor for many years and try to make those guys the sharpest around. Because oftentimes in our community, and we have to be real, that our facilities, our equipment is not generally the best. But the Lord blessed me to be in a position to make these guys the top of the heap. And they had those uniforms on, and they were sharp. And every time I saw it, reminded me of my dad. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Your church down is Huntington. Were you an elder?
I'm an elder. Mm-hmm.
Where is it down in Huntington?
I'm an elder at Shiloh Seventh-day Adventist Church. It's in Huntington, 1693 9th Avenue. And we go by the biblical Sabbath of Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 through 11. God has blessed me to be able to do Bible studies and teach and that sort of thing and understand prophecy, understand a lot of Daniel's prophecy. If you read the Bible at all, I would advise you to read Daniel chapter 2. Daniel chapter 2 outlines the 4 countries that will be here before the Lord comes back. And remember, Nebuchadnezzar had the dream. And Nebuchadnezzar had the dream. Nobody could interpret the dream, right? So he went out to the soothsayers. He went out to the eunuchs and that sort of thing to try to get them to tell him what the dream was. And they said, well, tell us what the dream is, and we'll give you the interpretation. And Nebuchadnezzar said, well, look, you guys have been pulling my leg all these years. I know you can't interpret nothing. He said, you tell me the dream and tell me the interpretation, and then you tell me the interpretation, then I'll believe what's going on. And so they couldn't do it. That's why the decree went out to kill the prophets in those days, and Daniel was a part of that. And so what happened, Daniel came back, and he said, look, King, why are you so hasty? He said, I can't interpret a dream, but I have a God in heaven that is the interpreter of dreams. He said, give me a little while. I'll pray to the Lord and have him to interpret the dream. And so he went to his 3 friends. You know who they were. Who were they? You Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? Come on, you know the story. But their real name was called what? Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And when they got captive, the first thing you do, what do? You change the person's name to get his mindset off. So anyway, they prayed to the Lord. And the Lord revealed that dream to Daniel. And his name that he changed to was Belteshazzar. That's the name that he got, Babylonian name. So he went back, and the Lord gave him that dream. You remember the story from Daniel chapter 2. You got to read that because it tells you the 4 countries that will be here before Christ comes back. I don't mean to inject anything other than the question that you asked me, but it's important that I answer it. So Daniel came back and said that image that you saw was great and terrible. It had a head of gold, arms and chest of silver, had a belly of iron, legs of what? Had a belly of brass, legs and feet and toes of iron and clay. And so what that means was, he said, thou, O king, are the head of gold. Which means if you go to history now, look at history, the first world power was Babylon. They ruled the world. United States is a world power, but they don't rule the world. Okay? And then who conquered the Babylonians? History now. The Medes and the Persians. That stood for the silver. Who conquered the Medes and the Persians? Alexander the Great. Right? And who conquered Alexander the Great when he died on a drunken binge at 32 years old? It was first pagan Rome, and then what? Papal Rome. Those are the 4 kingdoms that will be here before Christ comes into it. And I can substantiate that in Daniel chapter 7 and 8 by the other images, but I won't take the time to go into it. But the way things are in the world, you see, things are different. There's a lot of travesty in the world, and there's a reason for that. God is letting us know through his grace and mercy that he's coming back soon, and he wants his people to be obedient to his will so that he'll be able to take them home in his kingdom. And that's the importance of studying. So thank you for asking that question.
We would go to the video now.
We certainly can. This
saved a mother from experiencing the pain of losing a child.
Yeah, it happened in Charleston as she was driving. She noticed her daughter was turning blue. The 911 call and National Operations Jeremy D laid out exactly what happened and explained why Fryson is this week's hometown hero.
911, where is your emergency? I need your location. Where are you at the corridor?
It was back on March 10th when Kanawha County dispatchers took this frantic call.
She looked in the mirror, she saw her child who was having problems breathing, turning blue, foaming at the mouth.
A mother parked on the side of the highway, holding her 1-year-old daughter in distress.
Okay, just stay on the phone with me, okay? How old's your baby? She's just 30 years old. Okay, you're doing great. Just try to calm down, okay? He's not breathing. We're going to start CPR, okay? Sir, where was he not in Sherman Forest Road? How about any whatever?
As police and EMS are dispatched, fearful their help would come too late.
Of course, that's all you want to get.
But just in the nick of time,
Yes, sir.
Yes, I've got to breathe it. I need you to come to Shelby Court. Hurry, please, hurry. You'll see us on the side of the road. I just stop the help. I've got to breathe it, okay?
Okay.
a stranger intervenes.
She was trying to flag down cars, there were cars that passed her. Fortunately, the one man chose to stop, and that's why we're here today.
Fryson was the other voice you heard on that 911 call.
The Lord destined to be at the right place at the right time, so I give him all the credit for that.
The Charleston Police Department's ACF recognizes Mr. Fryson for his heroic act at sea.
Honored for his quick action, reunited with Mom and baby Riley.
Thank you so much.
It's a day she's tried to forget.
I really don't even remember. I was like,
And what Fryson hopes inspires others to look for moments to make a difference and to remember that life is irreplaceable.
Human life is very precious, and so we have to be very careful when we decide that it is in our best interest to take a life.
So for a lesson of faith and humanity, you are the WSAZ Hometown Hero.
Oh my goodness. Overwhelmed about it, and I'm really humbled.
A man already a hero to a mother and the officers who know what could have been.
Wow. That's awesome. And I'm sure that Sim doesn't want anyone to know this, but just to talk about his character, he sent you into Tara a thank you note from the original story. He's just a nice man.
He sends a thank you note, and in the process I found out that Sim, who's a car dealer extraordinaire in the Charleston area, he recently wrote a book called Here Comes Sim, about his life and his faith. And the little bits that I've read so far, absolutely fantastic.
I'll have to check it out.
It's going to be a vacation read, I think, for a lot of people. It's just a great story. He's just a great guy, and obviously that work continues alongside the road. That's terrific.
For sure. We should tell you that baby Riley was suffering from a medical episode, but Mom tells us that she's doing just fine right now.
I'm really humbled by that. I don't know if you'd seen this story before, but I was at home and I was going to the store. My wife was going to go to the store. And so something happened, and I said, well, let me go. So I got in the car and went, and as I pulled out on corridor G, I looked, and traffic was really heavy. And this lady was on the side of the road. I saw her get out of the car, and she had her baby, and she was screaming. You can imagine, she was screaming. And so all the cars were going by, and so I pulled her behind her, and I didn't holler at her. I said, what's the matter? What's the matter? She said, my baby, she's not breathing. I said, let me have her. So I grabbed her, and I looked in her eyes, and I see her eyes were kind of groggy. So when you're doing CPR with a baby, you have to put your mouth over the nose and the mouth because the air passage is not wide enough for to get enough air. So I put her over my lap and I rubbed her back to see if anything came out. And then I turned back over and she was coming around. And rather than me put my mouth on her when I didn't have to, I kind of massaged her stomach and she came about. So that's what happened. So the other thing that this didn't show was that I had her in my arms and there was a truck, not a truck, there was a medical truck coming up, you know. EMTs were coming up. The EMTs were coming up the highway. And so the people were there, and I had the baby in my hand, and I ran out the street, and I stopped the truck. Only the Lord allowed me to do it. I stopped the truck, and there was a guy in there that they were operating. I said, sir, I said, you have to excuse us. I said, this baby is young, and I said, they need to take care of her. So they checked her over, and everything was all right through her. So I'm really humbled by that. And the Lord allowed me to be in a situation where I knew what to do. I knew how to take it. And that's, I hope you understand, it's just a blessing that I was there at that particular point in time. So I just left. I never said anything. I left. I went on to the store, got what I needed, and I came back home and I told my wife, and I told my daughters. They said, okay, Dad. Yeah. I said, okay. So I did that, and then it was about 6 months later. I was at the house, and my wife said, honey, there's two city policemen out there in their cruisers.
In the driveway.
And they were in the driveway. And she was nervous. She said, what's that all about? Of course, you know, I wasn't nervous because I don't get in any trouble. And so they came to the door and knocked. And they said, Mr. Fryson? I said, yes, sir. And I said, they said, you know why we're here? And I said, that little girl. And my wife looked at me. And they said, yeah, that little girl. And so they ended up letting me have that award. But I want you to know that I do take pride in it, and I'm very blessed that I was able to save the little girl's life. I mean, that's a humbling experience. So remember, it's not about me. You know, the Lord blessed me to be there and know what to do. So.
But I would like to comment that in today's society, for you to stop with someone doing like that, it's really unusual because people even use children to stop people, to to rob them, to do lots of illegal things. And we've gotten to a point in our society that we're afraid. And as a woman, if I were driving, even though I might would have wanted to, I probably would not have stopped, just because of the fear,
right.
That someone could, and this child was in distress and really needed someone to help. So yes, it was the Lord, but I am grateful that you did stop because she really needed some help.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Yes?
I wasn't going to say anything, but Sim, I know you way back, and Susan, and I just want to say thank you for something. Sim had his dealership in Ashland, and I had been looking for a car, and I didn't know what I wanted, but Sim knew my companion very well, and he was like, you don't want that car, you don't want this, you don't. And I remember the day I had to buy a car. My car broke down at work, and my mom was in the hospital, and it was like, I called him and I said, hey Sim, I need a car. And he said, well, what do you want? I said, don't ask me what I want. I just need 4 wheels, a motor, and a heater. That's it. And he says, what do you want? I said, Sim, I want a Cadillac. And he said, okay. And I said, look, let's find me something and call. 3 days later, Sim had a man deliver, one of his, I guess, workers, deliver a red Cadillac to my mom's house. And I mean, Albert went, you better go out there and talk to this man. And the guy said, all I know, I'm supposed to give you these keys. And he said, call him. I am not to come back with this car. And I'm like, prettiest red Cadillac. And I went and told my mom at the hospital, and she goes, you're not buying a Cadillac. All I can say was that was the best car I ever had. I got stopped several times by the police because I was speeding. And I went, I'm not used to this power. Sim, thank you. Never got a ticket, but thank you. My mom enjoyed riding in that car.
I appreciate that. If you all only knew, how it makes me feel for that to happen, because I was in a profession that I really loved, you know what I mean? If I could have done anything else on earth, I mean, that's what I wanted to do. I thought I was done, that's why I left Ashland to get back to Charleston, because I always wanted to have one in my hometown, but I really feel blessed that I'm in a career that I've always liked. And this lady here bought a car for me. Her husband was my wife's boss at Union Carbide. And so they came all the way down and bought a vehicle from me. And she just told me it was the best car they ever had. It had, what, 300,000?
It had over 300,000. My daughter was driving it.
So I just really appreciate that. And one thing that I wanted to do, my dad's name was really honorable. And I never wanted to do, any of us, my brother Paul or David, we never wanted to do anything that would dishonor our parents. So we worked hard to try to establish that name and make sure that it was upheld in the right fashion. So I'm really humble about that. That's why the tribute to him and my parents were so important, because, you know, we had come from very humble beginnings, and it's just a blessing to be able to do that. That book that they talked about, one day we were coming in Dunbar, and we just finished cutting a lady's grass, and I was in the back of the pickup truck, and I looked at that sign. I was in Dunbar, right there. There used to be a Dairy Queen at the top of the hill there. And I looked over at the Dairy Queen, and I looked at the sign, and I said, you know, one day I want to be able to write me a book. And when I do that, I'm going to name the book, Here Comes Sam. So the Lord allowed me to grow up and be able to write this book of Here Comes Sam. And I just feel very humble about that. So a lot of my friends were in there, the baseball team is in there, and a lot of people.
And I wanted to make a comment about that.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
A few years back, Sim called around to a bunch of his old ball-playing friends. And he got this bunch of old guys together that didn't have any business going back out on the ball field anyhow. And he said, guys, we need to go out in style. He said, we need to give it one more shot. I don't know how many years we had been retired. It's been a while. So we got together, and we got our, you'll see, if you get that book, you'll see a picture of this team in there way back in, what was it, the 80s or 70s or somewhere like that. We played in the 70s. And we got that team together, crawling around, limping around, and all this. And Sim said, well, we always look good when we played before, so we're going to look good now. So Sim sponsored this team, bought us brand new uniforms. I mean, we look good. I didn't say we played. I said we look good. And we got to play in the new ballpark. Now, if you go to the new ballpark now, you'll see all these young guys running around. But one day, just for one day, there was a bunch of old men that relived their life on the ball field, playing a bunch of guys that were half our age. And believe it or not, the old men held their own with those young guys. For six innings or so like that. Yeah, we did. But this is his character. This guy will give you his all at any time. He's been a friend of mine for as long as I can remember. And he's been the same all the time. I knew his mother, who was a great Christian lady, and she instilled all of that in him. You're a good man, Sam. No, that's all I can tell you.
Nobody's good. I just, you know what I mean? I appreciate it. But remember, I just have been blessed to be in a situation where those things that are allowed to happen. I come from Charleston, West Virginia. Right. You know what I mean? And we ought to be proud of that. Yes. And I am proud of that. You know, I never have done anything other than proud of that. In fact, when I bought my store in Ashland, this lady right there, Regina, you see there, she worked at one of the business establishments that handled the money. And I went down and talked to her, and I told her how much I had, and she helped me formulate everything to get into Ashland. So that's another blessing. That's why I'm humbled to see you all here that we can talk about it. Regina, I really appreciate that. I might need some more if you got any contacts. I was blessed to run into some of the most formidable people that you'd ever want to be. Some of my friends that I ran into, you know, Muhammad Ali, Dusty Baker, Al Oliver, just on and on, Major Harris, just a lot of people. And they wanted to show another video. I could show you some of the people there that are there.
Booker T. Washington, who was born into slavery in 1856, went on to become the most influential black leader and educator of his time. He once said, "I have learned that success is to be measured not so much by the position that one has reached in life, as by the obstacles which one has overcome while trying to succeed." Today, his words still set an example for those traveling that challenging road to success.
With dedication and hard work, Sim Fryson has had a life full of accomplishments. A drummer, a successful entrepreneur, and a family man who found the blessings of a faithful life.
At the time I was working at IBM as a part-time installer. I was playing music. I was also playing baseball, and I was going to college, so I had a full schedule. And I went to buy a car when I was a junior in college, and I ran into a gentleman by the name of Keith Bateman. And he liked my personality. He said, "Sim," he said, "you ought to get involved in this business. I really believe that you can go a long way." I did so well that I stopped playing baseball, I stopped my music, and I stopped the job at IBM and became just a full-time student there, and also I worked part-time at the car lot.
His dedication took him to new levels, and after a few years, he became the owner of his first car dealership. But it was his faith in God that put him on the road to a very successful life. As a Seventh-day Adventist, he has followed the Lord's call to fulfill his mission.
I just realized that anything that we have, anything that we do, it's not of our own accord. You know, the Lord is the one that directs us. You know, I had all of these things, I'd accomplished all these things, and the most important thing that I could do was to have a relationship with God.
It was a car accident that had a real impact in his life. After that incident, he felt the need to fulfill a call.
I was involved in a car accident, my family and myself, and the Lord saved us. Our car rolled over 7 times. And statistics say that if a car rolls over 3 times, there's a fatality. But in our situation, my wife and my 2 daughters and I, we were saved. And it's just given me a whole new light about my future and where I should be.
As an active member of the community, Sim Fryson has had an impact on the lives of many people.
He's got that personable nature about him. He instantly connects with people, and then he's a family man and a church man. He's something that everyone can identify with, someone that people like, because he's just got the complete package. He's well-rounded.
Friends like Dusty Baker, former manager of the Chicago Cubs, have admired Sim Fryson's love for service and his passion to always help others.
And he's always positive. He's always, talking about spiritual things, about trusting in the Lord, and he's been blessed, and he certainly blesses those that are around him.
Sim Fryson is an example of a successful businessman who has enjoyed the blessings of a wonderful life. He has never forgotten that God is the most important part of his life and that he has a mission to serve and help others. With every step he takes, Sim Fryson knows where he's going. He follows a path that would take him to find the glory of God in every aspect of his successful life.
I was able to put myself in a position by the grace of God to come in contact with, some fantastic people. I happen to be the second black American to ever own a Mercedes-Benz franchise.
He was the first African American to own 4 car dealerships of the most prestigious brands. But after so many accomplishments, he decided to take a different path.
I really feel that I have a different calling now. The Lord is very strong in my life. I'm able to go across the country and speak at different Seventh-day Adventist churches about how the Lord has blessed me.
His message has touched others and has helped reshape the lives of those around him. For many of his friends, Sim Fryson is an inspiration and an example to follow.
He lives his life the way the Lord wants you to live it, and he gives back to other people. And there are 2 kinds of people in the world. There are givers and there are takers, and there's a lot more takers than there are givers, but Sim is one of the most giving people that I know.
You know, he's a down-home, local, homegrown talent that people feel comfortable with.
As a successful entrepreneur and a man of faith, Sim Fryson has lived the American dream. He enjoys a life full of success, but most importantly, he has followed the call he felt in his heart. Now he wants to share his experience so others may do the same.
The future is open for me. I'm praying about it. I want to make sure the Lord is showing me what direction that I need to take. I've already reached the climax in my life, is finding the Lord and being able to share the gospel with other people.
We hope this program has been an inspiration to you and all you hope to achieve. Be sure to join us next time as we continue to profile the people and ideas changing the way we live. I'm Lou Gossett Jr.
With every step he takes, Sim Fryson knows where he's going. He follows a path that would take him to find the glory of God in every aspect of his successful life.
I was able to put myself in a position by the grace of God to come in contact with, some fantastic people. I happen to be the second black American to ever own a Mercedes-Benz franchise.
He was the first African American to own 4 car dealerships of the most prestigious brands. But after so many accomplishments, he decided to take a different path.
I really feel that I have a different calling now. The Lord is very strong in my life. I'm able to go across the country and speak at different Seventh-day Adventist churches about how the Lord has blessed me.
His message has touched others and has helped reshape the lives of those around him. For many of his friends, Sim Fryson is an inspiration and an example to follow.
He lives his life the way the Lord wants you to live it, and he gives back to other people. And there are 2 kinds of people in the world. There are givers and there are takers, and there's a lot more takers than there are givers. But, Sim is one of the most giving people that I know.
He's a down-home, local, homegrown talent that people feel comfortable with.
As a successful entrepreneur and a man of faith, Sim Fryson has lived the American dream. He enjoys a life full of success, but most importantly, he has followed the call he felt in his heart. Now he wants to share his experience so others may do the same.
The future is open for me. I'm praying about it. I want to make sure the Lord is showing me what direction that I need to take. I've already reached the climax in my life, is finding the Lord and being able to share the gospel with other people.
We are a regimented organization. Everything, a place for everything, and everything is in its place.
That's how Sim Fryson runs his business, and that's how he lives his life. Even though he grew up in Charleston, West Virginia, Fryson's journey to Ashland, Kentucky, where he now runs the Sim Fryson Motor Company, has been a long one. Sim is the oldest of his father, Sim Fryson Sr.'s 3 sons. The family lived on a tight budget, but what they lacked in money, they more than made up for in love and encouragement.
And the environment that we had was just a very positive, upbeat, atmosphere. Well, I was always taught that you could do anything you wanted to do if you wanted to do it bad enough.
He was just looking at his dad because he broke his piggy bank.
Fryson's mom, Dorothy, says her son was always determined and inquisitive. She remembers his passion for cars developed at an early age.
The bus driver on South Hill would stop and pick him up and drive him around with him and ask him all the different cars. Now, just about 4 or 5.
They just interested me, moving around the different styles, different shapes, different manufacturers. So I just took a liking to that and just learned all the information I could about cars.
But as Fryson grew older, his interests shifted to sports and music. At West Virginia State College, he studied education. But one day, while shopping for a car, a dealer offered Sim a job that set him on a crash course with success.
I graduated on May the 8th. I went from the auditorium at the school down to the showroom floor.
8 months later, Fryson was promoted to a sales manager. That led to a life-changing opportunity at another dealership, Holland Chevrolet. The owner at that time, Joe Holland Sr., made Sim an offer he couldn't refuse.
He asked me, he said, well, what do you plan on doing in life? I said, I really want to become a dealer myself. He said, son, he said, if that's what your goals are, you need to come to work for me.
I think I recognized his character pretty strongly, and that he would be an asset to our company.
Shortly after accepting that job, Holland helped Sim get into the General Motors Dealership Academy. 2 years later, Fryson bought his first dealership in the small town of Fulton, New York. But it wasn't long before Sim got the call to return home from Joey Holland Jr., who was then running Holland Chevrolet. Joey desperately needed a good general sales manager, and he knew Sim was anxious to move back home.
He told me if I'd come back and work for him for just a year, that something would break for me in this part of the country, in my hometown.
And it did. That was 10 years ago, and the journey of Sim Fryson Motor Company in Ashland continues. The Mercedes-Benz, Nissan, and Honda dealership started from humble beginnings, but business has since skyrocketed. He's also picked up another dealership in Cincinnati, selling Lincoln and Mercury. One of the unique things about the Sim Fryson Motor Company is that it's closed on Saturday and Sunday, two of the biggest sales days of the week for a car dealership. The decision to close on the weekends did not come lightly. In fact, it was a defining moment in Mr. Fryson's business.
The fourth commandment specifically says, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. And I was not doing that.
Fryson is a Seventh-day Adventist and observes the Sabbath on Saturday, so he made a dramatic decision to close his business on Saturday as well as Sunday. Since the change 3 years ago, Fryson says business has grown nearly 30% each year.
The Lord plays the role, and as I started to take this walk with the Lord, I put him first above everything else. And as a result of that, he's made my life much greater.
Okay, bottom oven. Should be browning. Thank you.
When he isn't at work, Sim is spending time at home with his family. His wife, Susan,
Cat.
and his two daughters, Sydney and Sierra, look up to him.
He likes to handle different situations that arise that I feel that a normal person would be frustrated at. Sim seems to take in stride.
Hard work and dedication in everything we do is part of Sim's promise to his customers. It's also his personal motto. He says anyone can achieve this kind of success if you invest the time and the proper preparation.
You're going to spend 50 years in the workforce. So why not spend 6 years training and the other 44 years in the workplace doing what it is you like? I'm very blessed because I'm doing in life exactly what it is I want to do. If I could pick what I wanted to do in life, this would be it. This is a picture of my mom and my dad and myself when I was a little boy. And I always saved my money and I had to open my piggy bank that day. And my dad never thought he'd have a son. He never thought he'd given it up. So when he met my mother, he was 51 years old when I was born. I have two younger brothers. So he was really proud of his boys, you know. And so, proud of that picture there. This picture here is Muhammad Ali. When I was the general sales manager at Joe Holland Chevrolet, I was in charge of promotions. So I was able to get, through Joey, I was able to get Mr. Muhammad Ali here. I got a chance to spend a couple of days with him, and that was the highlight of my life. Not the highlight of my life, but one of the highlights, because I got a chance to go over a lot of his fights, and I was a connoisseur of his fights. I used to go over and tell him we had a great time together. He's in my book as well. This is the picture of the Fryson family. My brother Paul, there's myself, my dad, my mom, and my younger brother David. Now, we have 5 other siblings, and I don't want to take away from them, but we don't have a picture together, or I would have had that here as well. I would have had that here as well. course,
Tell us about the Obama picture.
Okay, I'll tell you about that. President Obama, this was before he became president. We went to the rally that they had at Morris Harvey, University of Charleston. We went to that rally, and so we didn't get a chance to see him there. So we were going home, and I needed to stop by the hardware store. And I stopped by that hardware store, and his motorcade came back, and he stopped right in front of us. And my wife said, there he is, there he is. So we got out, and we got a chance to talk to him, and we had that on video as well. I had a chance to talk to him, and I got a picture of me and I together. And I gave him one of my business cards, and I told him about buying a Mercedes. He said, man, I can't afford one of those. That's what he said. But later on in the book, I talk about how I know he could afford one of them now. That's how I met him. This is a featured article that did it in Dealer of Business. That's a nationwide magazine that they kind of did a write-up about that. And again, it's hard to imagine those sort of things happen. But it happened. I'm just grateful for that, what those things out there. See if there's anything else. This is the one I really cherish as well, because that gentleman in the picture right there is Tubby Smith. He used to be the head basketball coach of Kentucky. And we met, became friends, and then I got, by the grace of God, the 2002 Man of the Year Award, NAACP Man of the Year Award, and he was the keynote speaker. So that's him right there. And what happened, the mayor gave us the keys to the city. And Tubby made a quip when he was there, when he was doing his speech. He said, this is unusual. He said, generally when you look at people like us, they put you in jail and throw away the key. That's what he said. So he got a lot of humor there. So that was a humbling experience for me there. And I have a lot more, but I know I'm boring my wife because she sees it all the time. Yes, there's a couple more that hopefully you get a chance to see some of the people that I have met. And he's working on that. And then if you have any more questions,
Fryson?
Yes, sir.
When you brought Muhammad Ali here, did you bring Tony Hunsaker down from Fayetteville to say hello to him?
No, sir, I didn't. No, sir, I didn't do that. No. That was in 1992, by the way, that he was in the stages of Parkinson's, but he wasn't to that point yet. And boy, I really enjoyed, spending that time with him. And when he first drove up, he was in that limousine when he came up through the service department. And I was there at the time. I was the general sales manager, and I was with a bunch of guys. And he jumped out of the limousine, come running straight at me. He said, "You look like Joe Frazier. You look like Joe Frazier." So I shot him because I jumped back like that. He looked at me and said, "I better not mess with you." So we got a chance to talk about some of his fights, and that was something else. Some of his fights that I kind of highlighted with him was the one that he had against the Acorn. What was his real name? The Acorn's real name, I forgot what his name was. Talked about what was the Acorn's real name? They called him the Acorn. I'll think of it in that. Talked to the fight when he did with George Foreman. I said, "Man, I love you like a brother." I said, but I really was leery about that fight. Really leery about that fight. I thought he was going to lose it, and he prepared for that one. And I went through those rounds with him when he was in the fifth round. I was talking to Ernie Shavers. That's who it is. Ernie Shavers. Ernie Shavers in the second round hit Muhammad Ali with a left uppercut and knocked him out on his feet. You could see it. His eyes rolled back in his head. And so he was so rejuvenating with his body that even though he was out, he started faking like that he was hurt. He was really hurt, but he was faking like he was hurt, but he was really hurt. And so Ernie Shavers backed up and gave him a chance to get a win. If Ernie Shavers would have kept going and hit him, he'd have knocked him out. And so I talked to him about that. He said, "Man, you're not as dumb as you look." That's what he said. Then when he fought, he fought George Foreman in when he was fighting him in about the 5th round, you know, George Foreman was a big guy, beautiful guy. He telegraphed all of his punches, you know. And so what happened during that fight, about the 5th round, George Foreman walked away, and I knew what he said because I listened to all the commentators. I got a lot of his fights and that sort of thing. My wife bought me some of the fights. And I said, Muhammad, you know what you told him? He said, what? He said, this ain't no time to be getting tired. He told Foreman at the 5th round, because he walked away from the round, he went, and he told Foreman, he said, man, this ain't no time to be getting tired. Can you imagine what a psychological effect on him? And then he came out in the 8th round, and he was throwing those punches, and he was telling Foreman, he said, man, is that all you got? He said, is that all you got? Can you imagine fighting a guy like that and thinking that, you know, he just psyched him out. And then in the 8th round, he hit him in and knocked him out. And George Foreman wasn't right for a long time after that. So I got a chance to really, you know, relive those fights. And you can imagine having those things on your mind when you have those heroes and you're actually in a position where you're able to talk to them. I just never thought that that would happen. So I was humble.
Well, did he tell you that in that fight, when one of the times he had grabbed him and Jim Brown was very close to the ring, and then he told him, he said, I'm going to knock him out?
No, I didn't see that part. I was hoping that you get a chance to see this one video because it shows some of the people that. Okay, no problem.
It's been a wonderful. It's been a wonderful evening, very, very enlightening, and Sim Fryson is just like the other speakers that have been here during the course of the last 3 years. We began in 2014. Enlightening, refreshing, and a joy to be around. And that is what the organization, the West Virginia Center for African American Art and Culture, wanted to bring out with this Block Speaker Series program. Is for the guests to share their life, enlighten us as to who they are and what they have accomplished. I can owe my attitude to this Block Speaker Series and what the organization has accomplished thus far. To you, the residents, the citizens, and the people of Charleston and West Virginia, because you have accomplished so much, and your story needs to be told. The Block Speaker Series is one avenue for doing that. The West Virginia Center for African American Art and Culture, I myself owe a lot to you for building the foundation that we can build upon. As any builder knows, you have to have a foundation to start from. And we are laying the additions to a foundation that was created by Garnet High School, by Charleston High School, during years of integration and segregation. Those foundations that were laid by those people that are being brought out and shared with others. We're building the walls to that house, allowing history to be told. And through the organization, we're doing that. There are a couple of members of the organization besides myself here tonight who are on the board of directors. Miss Clarine Carter, they call her Miss Chloe, as you know, and Mr. Richard Wolf, who was at West Virginia State University, as well as Dr. Byers. But I'd like for Mr. Wolf to step up with me tonight because we, as you know, get the governor just as involved in our Block Speaker Series. If you come forward, Mr. Wolf, we'll share this certificate that our governor puts his name on. And we want to share it with Mr. Sim Fryson. If you come up too, Mr. Fryson. If you read this to Mr. Fryson through the governor's office, Sure.
It's a pleasure to pitch hit for you, Miss Chloe. I'll read for the governor. State of West Virginia, Jim Justice, Governor, whereas Sim E. Fryson is a native of Charleston, West Virginia, and whereas Sim E. Fryson is a devoted husband to his wife, Susan, and a loving father of 3 children, Brent, Sydney, and Sierra, and whereas Sim E. Fryson is a Seventh-day Adventist Christian and an elder at the Shiloh Seventh-day Adventist Church in Huntington, West Virginia, and whereas Sim E. Fryson received his Bachelor of Science in Education from West Virginia State College and associate degree in Business and Marketing from the University of Detroit through the General Motors Institute, and whereas Sim E. Fryson is a Vietnam veteran and proudly served his country for 4 years in the United States Air Force, receiving the Meritorious Service Award and obtaining the rank of Sergeant from the North Commissioned Officers Leadership School, and 2 years in the United States Naval Reserve while in high school, and whereas Sim E. Fryson began his automobile career while attending college selling cars on a small independent used car lot, and whereas Sim E. Fryson became a salesperson at C&O Motors and was the first black person in West Virginia to become a new car salesperson, F&I manager, sales manager, and general sales manager, and whereas Sim E. Fryson became president, CEO of Sim Fryson Motor Company in Ashland, Kentucky, and most recently owned a dealership in South Charleston, West Virginia, and whereas Sim E. Fryson has received numerous awards and honors, including WSAZ Hometown Hero, and was chosen by Black Enterprise magazine as one of the top 100 businesses in the United States from 1985 to 1989, and again from 1995 to 2005. And whereas Sim E. Fryson is a caring and giving person, and his dedication and commitment to his family, friends, community, and career has been an outstanding example to us all. Now, therefore, I, Jim Justice, Governor of the great state of West Virginia, do hereby bestow upon Sim E. Fryson this certificate of recognition. And I'll allow Mr. Kinzer to present this officially. All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Fryson.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes,
Kinzer.
sir. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. Listen, I really appreciate just the opportunity to be here to talk and have a little bit of fun with everybody, and especially see some people that I know and been friends for many, many years. Oftentimes, you don't see people get together until somebody is deceased. So we need to relish the time that we have together and make sure we make the best of that. So I'm humbled by it, and I really appreciate it. And it's an honor for me to be able to do this in my hometown. I really appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I'd like to close out the evening by saying that during the month of September through October, as I said, StoryCorps will be in Charleston recording histories of individuals who have an outstanding story to tell. Ms. Danielle Anderson is with the StoryCorps organization that have been with the in Charleston for the last several days, and they'll return in September through October doing some recordings. Our organization with others are partnering with them to present potential candidates to tell their story. This is also a part of realizing your histories and vocalizing them and putting them in the history books of life. Thank you very much for showing tonight. Our next guest, Dr. Charles Byers, will be here last Thursday of August, same time, same place, and bring some younger people with you, younger people being the age of 40, at least 40, but if they can come in the 20s and 30s, that would be just as fine. But let's fill these seats for our last guest for this year and begin planning for next year's block speaker series. Thank you very much, and I certainly have enjoyed your company. Good night. By the way, and I also want to thank the Culture Center Archives of History staff for being so gracious and hospitable for our block speaker series. And while we're here, tell them thanks as well. Thank you.